Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Pryor. I'm director of the Institute of Politics. In behalf of all of us here at the Kennedy School and the Institute of Politics and in this great community, we welcome each and every one of you here. This is a wonderful crowd. We've had some great forums already this semester, started off. Last night we had a great turnout for Katherine Harris, the Secretary of State of Florida. We don't shy away, Governor, from controversy from time to time around here, and that's what makes the forum so very, very exciting and so meaningful for all of us who have the chance to participate here from time to time. It is a great place, a great venue, and a wonderful environment to exchange ideas and thoughts. Before most of you were born, long before most of you were born, and before I became a United States Senator and before I came to the Institute of Politics, I was in fact, let me tell you a secret, I was a governor a long, long time ago. And I remember one day I was having a particularly bad day. Our dog at the governor's mansion had broken over the fence and had gotten in some garbage cans of the nearby neighbors, and they'd called a press conference and saying some pretty bad things about Barbara and myself and our dog. Arkansas had lost the day before, or a couple of days before that, to the University of Texas in football. And we were supposed to have beaten them that Saturday, and lo and behold, everybody had risen up and demanded that I fire the coach. And so that was going on. And the only time during my 4 years as governor that I had a bill overridden was on that particular day. And the legislature overrode my veto, and they promptly left for the horse races, never to be seen again, the state legislature. Well, I was at the governor's office late one night, that night, and it was a bad day, and I wanted the day to be over, and I wanted just to go home, and the phone kept ringing and ringing, and I was there by myself. Picked up the phone, and I said, "Governor's office." And this very, very angry woman on the other end of the line says, "Sir, I want to talk to someone no lower than the governor himself." And I said, "Madam, there is no one lower than the governor himself." Now, Governor Swift, I know you don't have days like that, but what a great honor and what a great pleasure it is to have you here. And what a special pleasure it is tonight for me to be able to present the man who's going to present the governor. He is our dean of the Kennedy School, Dean Joe Nye. He is a dedicated professional. He is an author. He is an educator. He is a mentor. He is a leader. And above all, Joe Nye is a public servant. He has served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs during the Clinton administration, as well as chairman of the National Intelligence Council. He has written books. He's recently appeared in the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Jim Lehrer, Larry King Live, all of this. I could go on and on. Who better to present our very distinguished governor tonight but our own very, very distinguished dean, Dean Joe Nye. Joe?
Thank you, David, and it is a personal pleasure and privilege to be able to welcome Governor Jane Swift to the Kennedy School Forum. She is a truly remarkable person. She began her political career at age 25. That's itself quite impressive. She was the youngest woman ever elected to the Massachusetts State Senate, and she quickly became the youngest woman in Senate history to hold a leadership position. And she became assistant minority leader and then was appointed to the director of the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation in 1997. She was elected lieutenant governor in 1998, and when Governor Paul Cellucci became ambassador to Canada, she became our governor. Her passionate commitment to public education has dominated her career in public service, and she's led a statewide initiative to improve the state's public education system. But I must say that I've been particularly intrigued by her leadership in the challenging times that we've seen since September 11th. She's really risen to the occasion, and her policies on security, particularly her prompt efforts on cleaning up the problems at the airport, I think have been impressive in showing how leadership can be exercised in terms of her talk tonight, challenging times. The Kennedy School's had a long interest and a strong interest in issues of governance in the state of Massachusetts. And two clear examples of that can be found in the Rappaport Institute for Greater Boston and the Taubman Center for State and Local Government. The Rappaport Institute, which was founded through the vision of Jerry and Phyllis Rappaport, has developed a number of programs to train public officials and do research that focuses on improved governance and public policy in the greater Boston region. And the Taubman Center, which runs a number of programs related to state and local government, has also been very interested in the governance of issues in Massachusetts. We're, in that sense, deeply indebted to Governor Swift for coming to join us, because she brings to us this evening the personal experience that we try to study from afar. And we'd like to see more of her here, because not only can we learn from her, but she sets a very good example for us. So please join me in welcoming Governor Jane Swift to the Kennedy School.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Dean Nye, and thanks to all of you for coming this evening. It's not quite the crowd that we had out on City Hall Plaza today, but it's a lot warmer. So it really is a pleasure to be back at the Kennedy School. Some of you may know that I actually attended an IOP supper as Lieutenant Governor, and it is always, I think, useful to come and share your ideas, particularly with students who are engaged in the study of public policy. And as you all no doubt are aware, this is our premiere for our country, our premier school of public service. And my message tonight to all of you is that we need you now more than ever. We need you because our country is fundamentally different than it was at this time last year. And public service is also fundamentally different. Not since John Kennedy challenged us to ask not have Americans been so moved to put their country first. There's a new focus on how public service improves all of our quality of life. We're seeing greater respect for police, for firefighters, and certainly for rescue workers. And our military men and women are once again revered as national heroes. Our president is enjoying some of the highest job approval ratings of any president, including his own father's during the Gulf War. But what I see is more lasting than patriotic surges and snap polls. Political scientists often talk in terms of realignments, when an issue cuts across existing party lines to create new loyalties among voters. This happened in 1856, when the Republican Party was born as a party of anti-slavery. And if you think in non-political terms, you could say that there was a realignment in the banking and securities industry after the crash of 1929, and in the press after Watergate. Dramatic events oftentimes force a fundamental shift in the way business is conducted. September 11th represents a realignment in public service. Every elected official, every civil servant, every municipal employee is doing his or her job differently today. And their job means something different today. The magnitude and uncertainty of the current threat makes public service essential to our national defense. It's impossible for any of us to guess how or when the war on terrorism will end. Our new enemy targets the infrastructure of everyday life, and he makes no difference and no distinction between civilian and soldier. As a result, our police, our firefighters, and all public servants are on the front lines at every level of government. Public leadership has never been more critical. On a personal and a more routine level, I can tell you that I'll never pick up my phone to answer it again with the same nonchalance that I did on the morning of September 11th, when I was informed that first one and then a second plane had hit the World Trade Center tower, and that in fact they had originated from Boston's Logan Airport. It was among the worst moments of my life. And I knew on that morning that I had a special responsibility as a governor and as a citizen to right whatever went wrong at Logan Airport that morning. In another time of great national challenge, Abraham Lincoln warned that the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. He said, "The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise to the occasion." As governor, rising to the occasion has meant rethinking how I do things and focusing on some core lessons of leadership. There's a new part of my job that if I do it well, none of you will ever know about. State government is engaged in an unprecedented level of information sharing and coordination with local and federal law enforcement officials. On any given day, my phone might ring, and it might be our Director of Commonwealth Security, Dick Swenson, who's been alerted to some potential problems. We then review our options with our public safety professionals and take whatever preventative action is necessary. This is a largely new arena for governors. We're used to, in one way, almost transparency, complete transparency in our jobs. I face the press every single day to explain to the citizens of Massachusetts why I make certain decisions. But in the wake of September 11th, balancing information and making tough calls have a level of intensity that hasn't ever, I don't think, or at least in my experience, been felt in state capitals. I'm guided by my belief that leadership does mean being honest and forthright, but also that part of that honesty is judging the seriousness of a situation before raising public alarm. It can sound like, and I'm sure it sounds like to you, a lonely place to be, but I think it's much less a lonely place when you can turn to good advisors. One lesson that I've learned is that leaders can't be afraid of hiring strong talent. That's certainly one of the many things that impresses me about our president, George Bush. His self-effacing style includes a genuine desire to hear from people who know more about a particular issue than he does, and he's not afraid to publicly admit that. And while he was lampooned when he first took office, I think this trait has become a sign and a source of tremendous strength. Some say he picked up that skill when he was across the river at Harvard Business School. I'm sure many of you would argue he might have taken a few classes at the Kennedy School to cultivate that trait. As governor of this state, I am very, very fortunate that I have access to some of the best minds in the world's greatest education and research institutions. And I'm sure you may have noticed that the Kennedy School is on my office speed dial. You gave me Marsh Carter when we needed to take a hard look at Logan Airport, my friend Marty Linsky when I was vetting running mates, more recently Arnold Howitt when we appointed a council on combating bioterrorism, and David Gergen, who in a 1-hour lunch provided me with some of the best advice that I've heard in years. I hope it works. David knows a thing or two about being a Republican in an overwhelmingly Democratic state. In fact, that is one of the facts of my life that does present its own set of leadership challenges. And one of the things that I think becomes necessary is that you have to learn very quickly how to build coalitions. And you also have to determine how you can work outside of the traditional power structure. Candidly, I use the bully pulpit more than many governors because it's a direct line to the people of Massachusetts. A couple of examples. Last year, I am embarrassed to say, Massachusetts was the last state in the nation to pass a budget. When that became a tremendous problem to those who depended most on us for certainty as to how they would serve people who depend on government, I took to the public airwaves and chided the legislature and presented my own proposal that I do believe helped to break the logjam and produce a budget. Unfortunately, the budget that I got was also flawed, and a similar series of public events resulted in some of the least well-informed cuts, some, for example, that were 100% reimbursable by the federal government, were quickly restored. I have taken to the bully pulpit on another issue that I candidly am having a tougher time with. We in Massachusetts refer to it as clean elections, but I'm not going to give up. I have included funding for this proposal in my budgets, and I do hold press conferences on a regular basis to draw attention to an issue that I consider fundamental to our democracy. For those of you who aren't from Massachusetts, and I'll take it from the applause, some of you don't know what clean elections are. Some of you may not be happy about the fact I'm talking about it. In 1998, the citizens of Massachusetts voted at the ballot box in overwhelming numbers for a question that gave people running for office an option to fund their campaigns with public dollars. The Constitution in Massachusetts states that once a ballot question passes, the legislature has an obligation to enact it, which in this case would mean fund it, or to repeal it. At the moment, our legislature has been taking an unprecedented third way, which is to ignore it. And despite an order from the Supreme Judicial Court, I firmly believe that in order for us to move forward as a Commonwealth and as a nation, citizens have to have faith in their government. Too many citizens do equate public service with self-service, and I believe it's my job and the job of every elected official to prove them wrong and to win their trust. And one of the best ways to do that is to honor the Constitution and to honor their wishes. If citizens do vote for something like clean elections, then politicians have to fund it, regardless of our personal beliefs. I am not a proponent of publicly funded campaigns. I am a proponent of democracy. Aside from being a Republican, I'm a lot of things that the power structure on Beacon Hill isn't necessarily used to seeing in their chief executive. Certainly, my gender is the most obvious, but I also grew up in a hardworking family in the smallest and most remote city in the Commonwealth. Also, no groans here, I didn't go to Harvard or BC. I went to Trinity College. And perhaps more distinctive, my idea of having fun at night isn't hanging out with the power brokers on Beacon Hill, but going home and having a quiet night with my daughters. And while motherhood, like fatherhood, doesn't qualify or disqualify someone for public office, it certainly informs my viewpoints. And as we begin next year's budget process, I'm finding strength in one parental reality. Mothers are used to making no one happy. They're used to making tough decisions, which is important because there aren't a lot of easy choices in our current economic climate for any governor of any state, and that's certainly the case here. Massachusetts law requires that the governor submit a budget plan within the first few weeks of the new year before our House or our Senate act. Some years, it's an exciting opportunity to grow worthwhile programs and break ground on new initiatives. This isn't one of those years. Fiscal year 2003 in Massachusetts is a time of scaling back and restructuring. It's time to prioritize, which I did by placing a priority on direct services to children and families and on public safety. For example, I increased our state's Medicaid budget because children should have access to health insurance and dental care. I fully funded our Department of Social Services because abused and neglected children must be protected even in an economic downturn. And I expanded the number of residential placements for the mentally ill because their needs are acute and immediate. But all of those things came at a price. I had to cut valued prevention programs like smoking cessation and adult preventative dental care. These are very difficult trade-offs, and I considered many factors. But I also asked myself one very simple question. What would I want someone else in the same situation to do to protect my daughter's future? A leader's ability to rise to the occasion, I also believe, depends on authenticity. Making good decisions and finding a way to manage difficult circumstances requires a certain degree of self-analysis. I've read that Mayor Rudy Giuliani turned to reading Churchill in the aftermath of 9/11. On that night, I drew strength from my family. The normal routines of everyday life re-energize me, and they also keep me grounded and focused. I also find strength in my faith. It's not a part of my life, candidly, that I talk very often about. I'm different from some politicians who don't hesitate to explain how their religion informs their policy decisions. And to some, it might seem that my faith is at odds with my policy decisions because I'm a pro-choice Catholic. But as a proponent of our democracy, I do believe in the separation of church and state. But what my religion has taught me and has given me through many years has made me stronger. It taught me to expect great challenges and adversity, but also that strength can be derived from doing the right things no matter what. And I have an abiding faith that assures me that what's most important at the end of the day is whether or not you made the world a better place for your family and for your community. So if the world's perception of a leader is one thing, I think all leaders have to stick with what helps them make the best decisions. I've relied on my family, my faith, and my convictions. Deciding whether or not to run for a full term as governor forced me to think about the values that guide me, the reasons that I chose public service, and my patient family who continue to support me. What I concluded, particularly after September 11th, is that I do feel a compelling obligation to serve this state and this country in a meaningful way. It certainly will be a long and challenging campaign, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting out there, debating, and facing up to the issues. Politics in Massachusetts, you may have noticed, is nothing if not lively. I was happy earlier this evening to see Eric Traeger, who is here. He's going to be the Harvard College, the head of the Harvard College SWIFT committee, and he'll be out on the campaign with me. I'm sure it's going to be a strong and large bunch of Harvard College students. But I also hope that whatever your views, that you'll be out there yourselves, either running for office or to help someone else who has a desire to serve in public elected office. You really don't have to fit a certain social profile or the conventional wisdom of what a leader should be. What you need are drive and commitment. You also need a vision of yourself as part of a great government, a great nation, and a great people. Don't wait for the perfect time or the perfect opportunity. I think that I'm evidence that there's no such thing. I often do wonder what my 3 daughters will say when they fully understand the circumstances that shaped their early years. What I hope they'll see was that their mom was trying to make the world a better place for them. And I hope they'll also realize, and it will be true, that you can contribute both to your family and to society. By becoming parents, we express our faith in the future. By serving our state and our country, we help ensure that that future is strong and bright. Perhaps some years from now, all of us will look back on this time and remember it as a moment when we realized that freedom depends on us. The choices we make and the future plan will determine America's course for generations. I believe strongly that public service is not only a choice worth making, it's an honor and it's a privilege to serve. Thank you.
Very good. Very nicely done.
We now have time for questions, and there are microphones here on each side of the floor as well as in the staircase on the way up on both sides. Let me remind you to identify yourself, tell us who you are, your relationship to the university as you ask your question. Make sure your question is indeed a question, and indeed a brief one, and also one question per customer, since there will be a lot of people who would like to participate. So I will start with this microphone.
Thank you. My name is Jessica Diaz, and I'm a freshman here at the college. I have a question for you about the MCAS. So under the current system, a student who can't pass the MCAS cannot receive a high school diploma, even if they have a severe learning disability that prevents them from doing so. Now, I'm aware that they may receive something that's called a certificate of completion. However, say for example, a severely dyslexic student may not be able to pass a certain part of the MCAS, but may be more than qualified for a career in graphic design. But every single employer that person might turn to, all they're going to see on the application is that they did not receive a diploma, unlike most of the other applicants. So I'm wondering how you justify the current system, and if you can't, will you pledge to grant real high school diplomas to students even if they do not pass the MCAS with severe learning disabilities?
Well, I not only can justify the current system, I think it's one of the most important and best things we've done as a state government in the last 7 years. And I know that's a controversial statement, but I believe it in my heart. For the first time in Massachusetts, every single student will have to achieve the same level of proficiency in math and English skills in order to achieve a high school diploma. And what that means is that public leaders like me, like every legislator in the Commonwealth, and teachers and educators have to guarantee that we're getting the services and the extra help necessary to those students. We've done it in Massachusetts. We're going to spend $55 million this year in extra help programs for students who aren't yet at a level of proficiency. And candidly, it ends a system where those who have wealth and who have parents who are ambitious for their children's future receive an excellent public education in Massachusetts, while those who are poor and live in poorer communities have not. And that, I think, is not right. Now, you get to one of the more difficult public policy questions with the MCAS, but we have done a great deal of work in addressing special needs students. We now have an accommodations process that, for example, if you have a learning disability like dyslexia, will allow you to have reading passages read to you. And we also guarantee that those accommodations are available to you by having an appeals process that will guarantee that if, in fact, you were not granted an accommodation that was necessary, that you can be granted that accommodation. We also have a Blue Ribbon Commission made up of regional educators who will review appeals for all students, special ed or non-special ed, who score within one standard deviation to make sure that, in fact, they can or cannot. And we also allow folks to apply, special ed students to apply to this regional panel of educators to demonstrate proficiency in a different manner. And so we have addressed many of the issues that concern the special ed community. And one of the difficult questions was if we exempted and gave a high school diploma to special needs students and had a different system. First, we'd be violating federal law that says you can't have a separate education system and a separate standard for special ed students under IDEA than you can for regular students. But also many of the parents of special education students were very concerned that the schools would walk away from their responsibility to provide a sound education to special needs students. And so the issue of special needs students and special education students under our Chapter 766 and how they work into our MCAS program, I think is one of those issues where the public policy debates aren't black and white. They aren't clear, and that's why I think the fact that we have established a 3-level appeals process and that I went out and personally met with dozens and probably it numbered into the hundreds of educators, teachers, and parents, including a special education, several special education constituency groups, helps to inform and make a public policy that I can stand by and I'm comfortable with.
Thank you.
Yes, Governor Swift, I graduated from the Kennedy School 2 years ago, and as a Republican myself, I've read and been very concerned about your leadership as governor of Massachusetts, given the many missteps that have been reported in the newspapers. And my concern is that as you run for the office of governor this year, how will you convince voters that you have learned from these missteps and that you will have grown in your leadership capacity and will hopefully not repeat similar things that have, that you've done in the past?
I guess one of the things that I hope I demonstrate is leadership is something you demonstrate and you do on a daily basis. I don't expect, and I understand that people don't agree with all the things I've done. I have candidly admitted that I made mistakes. I think that's a sign of leadership. Not repeating those mistakes, you're absolutely right, is a good way to demonstrate leadership. But at the end of the day, I don't think it will matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an unenrolled voter in Massachusetts. The voters will vote based on whether or not they think that I hold the values that are most important to them and whether or not the policies that I put into place measure up to the ones that they think are important for their families. And that is not to in any way say that making mistakes or having transgressions excuses those public or is totally irrelevant to the political process. But I think that we do best when public leaders conduct themselves in a way, which I'm pledged to do, where we focus on issues and when the voters have an opportunity to vote at the end of the day on whether or not they agree on the issues that people stand for.
My name is Stephanie Soroki. I'm a first-year public policy at the Kennedy School. Governor Swift, you alluded to your plan to eliminate basic dental care to mass health recipients. This means that instead of fillings and saving their teeth, the most vulnerable adults in our state will get extractions and eventually lose all of their teeth. Furthermore, low-income adults who are more prone to oral cancer will not get oral cancer screenings, and the state will lose money because of an increase in emergency services. My question, what alternatives do you have planned for the up to 500,000 eligible recipients who depend on such coverage?
One of the things that we're doing is making sure that we protect community health centers, but I think I candidly admitted that eliminating preventative dental coverage for adults is one of the most difficult things that I did in this year's budget. It was a reflection of the fact that while we do have coverage right now for children on Medicaid and dental coverage, it is wholly inadequate. We have paid rates that make many dentists reject accepting children or Medicaid patients. And so when we were looking at the budget, we knew we were going to have to make a significant tens of millions of dollars investment in the rates that we pay to dentists in order to really make dental care available to children. And we were doing that in light of a budget, a Medicaid budget that I submitted that already had an increase of 11%, $537 million increase in this year's budget, because Medicaid basically can be controlled, the cost can be controlled in three ways. One is in utilization, and we have done a lot of things in utilization and looking at adult dental coverage was the one area that we did decide to take a cost savings in so we could reinvest those savings in children's dental care. The other area you can go to is in rates for providers. We've had a blue ribbon task force that has demonstrated that we are probably not doing a very good job in protecting our first-rate healthcare system in Massachusetts because of the low Medicaid rate in terms of percentage of costs that we cover to both nursing homes and hospitals. So I couldn't find savings or decrease the increased costs under the provider rates. And then most importantly, in an area that many states I'm sure are revisiting, we have dramatically expanded access and eligibility to our Medicaid program. Every child in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is now eligible for a health insurance program. I wasn't willing to establish a wait list on that. I wasn't willing to cut off coverage for that. I wasn't willing to change the income eligibility guidelines for that. And we also have extended fairly significantly, and I think successfully more than most states in the country, access to Medicaid for the working poor. And I didn't want to similarly start a waiting list on that, restrict eligibility. When you looked at all of those things, even with the dental coverage being eliminated for adults, we had still an 11% increase, and we're taking the savings from adult preventive care and investing them in making sure that we really have care available to children. Wasn't an easy choice, but when I looked at all the things that we do, it was a better choice than some of the others we were faced with.
Governor, thank you for coming to speak to us tonight. My name is David O'Brien. I'm a mid-career student from here in Massachusetts. It's been said over the last year that President Bush has grown on the job. One of the things we learn here at the Kennedy School is to talk about our strengths and weaknesses. What have you discovered about yourself? What's the one weakness or speak of one weakness that you've discovered about yourself over the last year, and what are you doing to address it?
Like, unlike many people, and I probably shouldn't say what I was going to say, but I'm having trouble limiting it to one. One weakness that I have and that I have to deal with from a leadership standpoint, particularly going into an election year, is I tend, and I don't think this is always a weakness, maybe I should admit my weaknesses without making a statement and excusing them, but I tend to get mired in the details, and I do think it's important for leaders to take a big picture view, and I think I spend sometimes more time than I should getting down to every level of detail and policy decisions, so I get too involved in policy debates that I really should be making final decisions on. And that, when time for any elected official is such a precious commodity, and when I do think citizens are looking for a broader vision, I think in these times, and in the time that I'm in my political career where I'm undertaking a rigorous re-election, that is a weakness, or at least a character trait that is a weakness for the foreseeable future because of the times and the times generally in society and where I'm at right now that I'm struggling to deal with. I don't have a problem hiring good people, but I like to know every single thing they know, and that takes a lot of time.
Governor, I'm Sarah Hamlin, and I was a mid-career graduate in 2000. In a normal year, my family has 6 working adults, but this is not a normal year. 3 of my family members have been laid off. 2 are students graduating into an uncertain economy, and the 3rd has taken a pay cut. Could you speak about options for families who are facing their unemployment and health benefits running out, and what you're doing about the economy?
One of the things that we did do directly to benefit people who are dislocated was to eliminate the 2-week waiting period for unemployment insurance benefits and increase the contribution that we made toward COBRA. It was 60, I think, or 70%. Now it's 80%. And we also offer a health insurance program through unemployment insurance. But you're right, it doesn't last forever. It lasts for the duration of your unemployment insurance. We are trying very hard, first and foremost, to make sure that we emerge strong from the national recession. One of the things that we're doing is to make sure that we're prioritizing our capital spending in a way that stimulates the economy. State government doesn't have a huge role to play in stimulating the economy like the federal government can, but we can make decisions around the margins and how we spend our $1 billion in capital spending that keeps the economy moving forward. I also am working very hard to protect our competitive position so that as the rest of the nation emerges from this recession, we won't have gone back to being such a high-cost state that businesses are pulling more jobs out of here. And that's a hard argument to make sometimes, because defending our current tax structure when the bad things will only happen if we do it, and by then you'll be fighting to change it back, can be a very, it's sort of a one-step removed argument. And so I have to be more effective at letting folks understand that a big part of the reason for defending the tax policies that we've put in place over the past 10 years is because it has given us a more diversified economy. The other thing, the healthcare stuff that we're looking at, we're going to propose a med reform package in the next couple of weeks. You can't understate the importance of our hospital and healthcare industry in Massachusetts. It not only employs a ton of people and gives us a great quality of life. We have access to care that is unparalleled in the world, but it drives a lot of the new kinds of businesses that are growing. We, I think, can make a very good argument that we're the biotech capital of the country and maybe the world. Certainly California has some bragging rights there, but if you talk to the Biogens and the Amgens and the Millenniums, they'll tell you that Massachusetts, because of Harvard, because of MIT, in close proximity to some of the world-class teaching hospitals, makes a big difference. And the last thing, I don't want to embarrass her, but Elizabeth Ames, who's a Kennedy School alum, is my Director of Economic Development. She and her team have been working for some time to put together a strategic plan for Massachusetts that recognizes that different geographic areas have unique challenges and opportunities that we have to meet. And one of the results of that, well, the plan isn't published yet, it will be in the spring, is that I have proposed that we increase our investment tax credit for the most distressed areas of Massachusetts, in 19 communities whose unemployment is more than 50% above the national average, from 5% to 15%, a tripling of that credit, which would help some communities and some of the representatives who are here at district, who I hope will help me on that.
My name is Betsy Sykes, and I'm a sophomore at the college. When you were first appointed to the governorship and you came under intense media scrutiny for giving birth in office, I was struck by
Not quite, but it was close.
Well, sorry. I was struck by the lack of female organizations that came out in support of such personal choices, and I was wondering if you felt betrayed by such organizations and why in the end you thought this was so.
It's a complicated question. And as I said earlier, on the issue of gender and politics, I probably will need to be in an academic system and setting like this and decompress for a while to fully process all of my thoughts and all of the lessons I've learned. I haven't probably done as good a job in self-analysis on that front, partly because it's counterproductive, because I probably wouldn't share it with the news media covering me, everything I said anyway, if I came to that assessment. I sense that's where I'm heading. But I will say this, and I'll get in trouble. As women, we have got to figure out how we can support each other's choices without judging them. This belief that those who stay home and take care of their children somehow love their children better, or those who stay home with their children are somehow just not ambitious or are not as good as the rest of us, or on the other side, those who go to work really just don't care about their children, or they're so ambitious that they override their care for their children, is such a simplistic and unfair assigning of values to people you don't know. And the fact that women engage in that is very disappointing to me. And at some point, leaders in the women's movement on both sides of that issue, and both sides are responsible and guilty of assigning motives and less than attractive traits to people who make different choices in themselves, have got to come together and, first of all, figure out why we would ever engage in such a counterproductive activity, and then figure out a way to value everybody's choices. Different families make different decisions every single day, and why we feel compelled to pass judgment is really very confusing to me.
Thank you.
Before we turn to the balcony, I just want to say that some male voters, including this one, admire the way you've handled it.
My name is Brian Scott. I'm a first-year student at the medical school. It's the responsibility of every governor of every state to set up a developmental disabilities council. I was wondering, as someone new to the state of Massachusetts, what has your Massachusetts Developmental Disability Council done, and what has been your specific involvement with that council?
We have an Office on Disability, which I think fulfills those obligations, and one of the things that they do is to make sure that we're aware of barriers and issues that face individuals. They mostly work with my Secretary of Health and Human Services, Bob Gittens, who is terrific, and I have monthly or 3 times a month cabinet meetings where folks bring me up to date on the issues. Certainly, the developmental disabilities and all disability advocates have been very vocal, and I think deserve a lot of credit, even though some of them still don't agree with where we are, and the degree of thought and complexity that's gone into our response to the special education requirements for a diploma under our education reform plan. But sometimes it's issues as simple as ADA compliance, barriers. We in state government often are there to enforce the laws. Sometimes we need to do better self-analysis on whether or not we're meeting the laws that are established by the federal or the state government. And so there's a whole host of things that groups like that work on. And most councils like that funnel their information through the requisite cabinet secretary, through either my chief of staff's office or up directly to me.
Good evening, Governor Swift. My name is Ann Marks, and I'm a student at the Kennedy School. I'd like to know how you personally reconcile your pandering to the gay community with your choice of a gay lieutenant governor candidate with your own, at best, lukewarm record on gay rights issues.
Well, I would disagree that I have a lukewarm record on gay rights issues, but that's neither here nor there. Candidly, I didn't pick Pat Guerrero because he was gay or because it didn't matter to me. I picked Pat Guerrero because I have a tremendous amount of respect for the public service that he's presented. As the state representative elected for 3 terms, I worked with him on tax issues, on education issues. I worked with him when he was the mayor of Melrose on improving education. He has a different perspective than I do on being a mayor. You sort of see things differently, and I think that's a valuable perspective. When he worked on my staff, I came to increasingly respect and value his opinions on issues. We've agreed to disagree on the issue of gay marriage, and I didn't feel it necessary to choose someone who agreed with me on every single issue, and on some very controversial issues, that can be uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, his sexual preference would have only been the issue that would have disqualified him from being my running mate, because he met every single other criteria, and I didn't think that was right because I don't think it should be an issue.
Hi there. I'm Benjamin Bolger, and I'm a graduate student in the School of Design. And Governor Swift, you've had a rather unique opportunity to both be a lieutenant governor of Massachusetts and also the acting governor, and also go through a transition period. What are some insights that you've drawn on how to positively organize a relationship between the governor and lieutenant governor, and have there been any examples from other states that you've looked at to draw inspiration for your own leadership?
Actually, we have, I think, developed, but not by any sort of powers that we give the governor or the lieutenant governor, but through relationships, a very good working relationship. And candidly, I probably didn't appreciate just how important that was to the governor until I was the governor without a lieutenant governor. There are a lot of important issues, and I have terrific staff. I have terrific staff surrounding me directly in my office, terrific cabinet members who bring area of great expertise. But there's a different flavor to the advice and the counsel you get from someone who has all of that and hears all of that stuff, but also is going to have their name on the ballot at some point. And even people who come into your administration, who've run for office before, you sort of lose the reality check when your name isn't on the ballot anymore. It just changes the way you process information and the opinions that you give. And there's a shared workload. There are certain things that folks want me. Usually they always want me, or the governor, whoever the governor is. The lieutenant governor is usually their second choice if they're in an empowered position. One of the things that's interesting in other states, some other states actually make their lieutenant governor a cabinet secretary of a particular agency, and that intrigues me. I would never do it here because we have such a strong co-governor relationship, but if someone else were elected governor that didn't do the full partnership piece, I would think we might want to explore at least giving them significant responsibilities, because the job is really big and there's a lot of stuff that you can do. And I happen to believe you need a lieutenant governor. Obviously, the last couple governors have proved that, if for nothing else, and to keep the seat warm. But I think it can be a tremendously important job, but it's really interesting if you go to lieutenant governor's conferences, because there is a huge diversity of what people's roles and responsibilities are. And in many cases, you find that it is defined based on the relationship with the governor more than through Constitution or anything else.
Hello, my name is Nora Kelly. I'm on staff here at the Institute of Politics. You spoke toward the end of your speech about the importance of your faith. I was wondering if you could talk both personally and politically about the crisis of clerical sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and whether or not you believe Cardinal Law should resign.
I will talk personally and professionally. First of all, as I said, I believe in the separation of church and state. And one of the reasons I think it's consistent for me to be a pro-choice Catholic is because I don't think my personal learnings and moral feelings on an issue should inform my position as a political leader. And so on that front, I don't think governors should be interfering with the operations of the church. Having said that, as a practicing Catholic, I don't think you can understate, and as a mother who's a practicing Catholic, I don't think you can understate the importance of the church figuring out how they're going to prioritize the protection of children. It's a serious issue. It concerns people who practice their faith, and there are a lot of people who are Catholics. I call it, cultural Catholics. You grew up as a Catholic, but you don't practice. And sometimes folks in that category have a lot of issues with the church. I've found in the last couple of weeks that the people who are most concerned, and I'm talking now as a practicing Catholic, with this issue are those who practice their faith, and that's why I think it's such a significant issue that the church has got to address.
Marilce Rodriguez Garcia. I'm a Kennedy School alumna and an employee of the Boston Public Schools and an unenrolled voter. You alluded in your State of the Union address to changes in the bilingual education law in Massachusetts. Could you share with us your vision of bilingual education in Massachusetts, particularly in light of the system we currently have and the efforts to eliminate it entirely coming from out of state?
I think mine is the best middle road. It recognizes that the current system, as I said in my State of the State speech, isn't working for children who have English as a second language, because the MCAS tells us that. That's one of the values of MCAS. It tells us where we're failing children, and we're not doing well by children who come here not speaking English. On the other hand, I think there's a way to fix the current system that's thoughtful, and I actually filed my bill today. My bill would say that there would be a 2-year limit on programs that are TB programs, and that we would give more flexibility and choice to local school districts and to educators. And so we list 5 different programs that we think structured immersion, transitional bilingual education, home language instruction. There are 2 other that I'm missing. Maybe I'm getting better at not knowing every single detail, but there are 2 others as well. And what it would do is require a school district to file a plan using one of those methods or another method that they find that's research-based that works, and make sure that there's informed consent from parents about the system that they're using. There is a waiver from the 2-year proposal, but the Department of Education, or the 2-year limit, but the Department for transitional bilingual programs, but the department would be empowered to review that. So I think we just put more of our faith in teachers and educators, but we hold them accountable. And my view is that the bilingual proposal we've made is modeled after what we've done in ed reform in general, which is to have confidence in the field, but have standards by which we measure them.
2 more questions, left balcony and then floor.
Hello, my name is Sonia Kastner. I'm a junior in the college from Newton, Massachusetts. At Harvard this year, we've had a lot of discussion about minimum wage issues and action in the past week, in fact, on those discussions. And I know that in the state legislature, there has been a lot of discourse on a bill to yearly increase the minimum wage indexed to cost of living expenses the same way that legislators and state employee salaries are indexed based on cost of living increases. I was wondering if you could address your stance on that issue.
Well, in the past, I have voted for some increases in the minimum wage. I don't believe that there should be an automatic increase, particularly at the state level, for this reason. There are competitive issues. And if our minimum wage gets so far out of line with our bordering states or competitor states, that could actually have a detrimental effect. However, I don't buy the argument that any increase in the minimum wage always puts us at a competitive disadvantage, but I think legislators can make those decisions, and oftentimes most of the pressure, in my opinion, has come to increase the minimum wage. It's much harder not to do that just because of the way that democratic politics with a small d works, and so I think legislators should have to make those tough decisions, and that you have to be able to balance the competitive disadvantages with the real need by individuals in a particular year or situation.
Hi, Brian Talkman, an MBA student at the business school. In some respect, the big dig can be seen as keeping the state's unemployment rate below the national average. And I was wondering if quietly on Capitol Hill, those in charge don't mind the overruns because it gives the state a fiscal stimulus that doesn't have to be debated in the legislature.
Truthfully, the big dig is a huge economic impact on Massachusetts. And mismanagement issues and cost overruns aside, this will be the most extraordinary public works project in Massachusetts since the Back Bay was filled in. It will open up an area of Boston that will be more easily accessed. It will provide us with one of the most significant parcels of space in many generations that will enhance the city. And we're starting, and not to mention the transportation and infrastructure improvements for folks who try to commute north and south in 93. That doesn't excuse our need to have to manage that project in a financially responsible way and minimize the impact on toll payers and taxpayers. But I think it does put into context, which I assume that you are trying to do, that this is a very big project that does have significant economic benefits. And the truth is it will have economic benefits to all of New England because it's that enormous. And folks can argue whether or not we've gotten $14.5 billion worth of value. It's hard to see right now because you don't see most of what we've done because it's underground. I think that as we get control over managing the costs and bringing the project to completion, that folks will, many years from now, look back on the project and realize it made an extraordinary impact on the quality of life in Massachusetts. We probably will forever have certain debates about aspects of it and whether we should have done them or not, but net, I think it's going to be a huge benefit to the Commonwealth and to New England.
Governor, thank you for your frankness in addressing us this evening. We hope we'll see you back at the Kennedy School many times. And please all join me in thanking Governor Swift for a wonderful evening.